You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point, your nugget source for all news, draft coverage, free agency, weekly game analysis, game day betting picks, and fantasy football updates regarding the National Football League. Here's your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Straight to the Extra Point right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network and the beginning of our 2021 season previews. First of 4 episodes here on the channel, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your August 4th, 2021 edition, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and giveaways by following the podcast on Twitter at Armchair GM Pod, as well as following us on Facebook and Instagram. You can listen to us on many platforms, including Spreaker.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer. And now, obviously, as you can see here, in video form on youtube.com, so make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, smashing that like, and hitting that bell icon for all updates regarding any episodes that get posted on our channel. So make sure you're giving us some love on the YouTube and video side of the podcast. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me underneath right there at Caputs13_AGM. And as always, I'm pleased to be joined on the NFL portion of the network by my good friend and co-host. He is the former OUA athlete for the Waterloo Warriors and practicing medical professional. He is Miklos McMaster, wearing his Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders sweater. Miklos, I know I wanted to give you something to kick off the season with, so we're going to be talking about the West divisions today, the AFC and NFC.
Coach, I am so fired up, as I was saying before the show started, about this entire NFL season. I'm fired up about my Raiders. I'm fired up about every team, even the teams that I hate. I mean, it's a great time of year. Football's coming back into action, and I can't wait to see the teams hit the field in this new extended season.
Yeah, the added one extra regular season game and one less preseason game, what we've all been trying for years, and we finally get it. So the extra game, we're going to have to see how that affects the season, but before we get into it, guys, make sure you're checking out our website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding the network, link articles, podcast episode sponsors, and contributor news. Everything's on there for you guys. Please go and check that out. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start off the show today by talking about the NFC West division. And Miklos, I mean, if there was a most competitive division to start with in the NFL, we'd look no further than this first division that we're going to start off our season previews with in the first episode today here, and that's the NFC West. I mean, you look at the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Rams, and the Cardinals. There really is not a bad team in this division right now.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, it's kind of been that way last 4 or 5 years. I mean, maybe one of the teams has dropped off compared to the others, but it has been an unbelievably tough division to win. Very few repeat, no three-peat winners, division winners in this division. And especially this year, I mean, with the trades that have happened, people coming back healthy who were injured last year, it's going to be a bloodbath there all season.
Yeah, so as Miklos was saying there, got it up on the screen for you YouTube viewers here. The past winners of the NFC West division going back from 2010, you have the Seahawks and then the 49ers winning twice in a row, the Seahawks again in 13 and 14, the Cardinals winning in 15, the Seahawks in 16, the Rams in 17 and 18, the Niners in 19, they went to the Super Bowl obviously, and then the Seahawks in 2020. So a lot of parity within this division. Obviously the Cardinals kind of they kind of bottomed out for a few years to kind of build up to what Steve Keim and that regime has done now with that team, and a team that we both have been in love with for the last 2 off seasons. But all 4 of these teams have won the division in the last 20 or last 10 years. So I guess that says, to the strength of this division, not just around the league, but within their own division.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even in the off years, Arizona has, as we always say, divisional wins are so hard to get. And Arizona has been a problem even for for divisional winners. Even in the heyday of the Legion of Boom, I mean, they gave the Seahawks trouble in those days, and I mean, it's just going to get even more difficult to try and sweep games in this division. That's for sure.
So let's quickly look at the standings last year. So up on the screen there, the Seahawks won at 12-4, the Rams at 10-6, the Cardinals at 8-8, and the Niners were 6-10 with a very injury depleted roster. And the fact that they even were able to get 6 wins, I think, was a testament to that coaching staff and that organizational depth, just for the amount of injuries that they lost last year. The games that players lost to injury last year was incredible, and they still managed to get 6 wins. So I think that was, as much as you would hate to go from being in the Super Bowl to going 6-10, with all that they endured last year, I think that was a pretty serviceable record.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just, I think we talked about this a lot last season. There was a couple of teams that got absolutely devastated by injuries, and it was just a testament to the coaching and the organizational strength that they didn't just completely fold based on just rolling guys out onto the field. They had completely different guys week in, week out, that they're calling in free agents, some of these teams. And like the Broncos last year, for example, who we'll get to. But when you're just calling guys off the couch coming into play, to scrape together wins doing that kind of stuff is a testament to the organization as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. So the Seahawks winning it last year. Let's get into the teams as they stand right now, Miklos. So let's start off here with the Arizona Cardinals, the team that you and I both, like I mentioned earlier, have been really impressed with how they've completely turned around the organization after 2 really, really bad years. Now, with that new regime, Cliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim, and Kyler Murray as their starting franchise quarterback. And what are you thinking about the Cardinals this year, Miklos? Are we as high on them going into this season as we were kind of the last 2 seasons?
I think we absolutely are. I mean, they, again, had a terrific offseason. I mean, yes, they lost Patty Pete, which is, I mean, you cannot overstate how big of a loss that is. I know he's getting older, may not be in as top form, but I mean, he's a team leader. And I'm still not convinced that they've lost Larry Fitzgerald. I know we've started camp, practices are coming, and he's not there yet. But, I mean, he's a future Hall of Famer. If he showed up tomorrow and walked in, he's getting onto that field, and they're not going to ask him any questions. So I'm still, until mid-season, I'm probably going to be skeptical about whether Larry Fitzgerald has fully hung them up or not. And then the final big loss for them was Kenyon Drake. But, I mean, they bring in James Conner in the offseason. They replace the leadership of Patty Pete with J.J. Watt, which, I mean, oh, my God, how happy is Chandler Jones, who's finally coming back healthy. Now he's going to have less focus on him with J.J. Watt taking up the other side. They bring in Malcolm Butler to replace Patty Pete as well, which I think was a really good move. Kind of keep some good star power in that secondary. And then even adding A.J. Green. I mean, Kyler Murray really has no excuse this year of not taking the next step, given the guys that are around him. And I think the biggest thing for them this year is going to be proving that they can win down the stretch. That was where they struggled last year. They came out hot. They looked amazing at the start of the season. Then they kind of faded down the stretch at the end of the season. So this is the year to prove that they have what it takes to grind out, especially this year in an extra game season.
Yeah, I really like the way that this team is made up, and like you mentioned, they brought in some very good leaders on this squad. J.J. Watt's been one of my favorite players to watch over the last decade, and what he's done for that Houston organization. Now leaving, he's going to be a big loss in that regard. And even like you mentioned, bringing in A.J. Green, and he's been in the league, we feel like forever now as a very solid former number 1 receiver for the Bengals, and was kind of the guy that they relied on for many years there. As now he's getting older and he's kind of more of a role receiver at this point. But when you can roll out DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, Christian Kirk, and then bringing in the speedy Rondell Moore out of the draft, the fastest guy in the draft, I mean, and then obviously Chase Edmonds and James Conner, they've lost some guys, Miklos, but with their additions, I feel like outweigh their subtractions at this point, because this is going to be a scary good offense under Cliff Kingsbury and what Kyler Murray has continued to progress in his first 2 years.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest additions, which I neglected to say the first time because I'm still hoping that it didn't happen and that I somehow hallucinated it, but the addition of Rodney Hudson, which I still don't know how we let walk away from us, is going to be unbelievable for Kyler Murray. He's a guy that can control the entire offensive line, makes the calls, extremely intelligent, has been so solid over the past couple of years. And I think that is, you cannot overstate how valuable of an addition that is to an offense.
Yeah, they've added a few offensive linemen, including Justin Pugh from the New York Giants as well. So very good on the offensive side of the ball, and on the defensive side of the ball, you obviously have a guy like Isaiah Simmons, who coming out of the draft was a Swiss Army knife 2 years ago, and basically you could put him at linebacker, you put him at safety, he's gonna play wherever you kind of want at that point. And like you mentioned, with Chandler Jones and J.J. Watt coming at you on the outside, that's got to be pretty scary for most offenses to try to defend that. Even they're getting up in age now, but Malcolm Butler, they've just added a lot of quality veteran players that have been elite players in this league that can still go out there and not only just prove that they can still play, but they can also show that they can mentor these young guys around and show them what it takes to be elite players. And for me, I love what this Arizona Cardinals defense makeup wise looks like. And again, the loss of Patrick Peterson, but they've added guys to kind of stabilize that loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even the addition of Zaven Collins, the linebacker, I mean, still strengthening that defense as well, given in two young linebackers now with Isaiah Simmons, as you mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of talent back there on the defensive end and a lot of talent on the offense. I mean, they're poised for a good, hopefully, couple of years for Arizona fans.
Yeah, they've definitely got a window here very nicely while Kyler Murray's still on his rookie deal here. Their secondary is the only thing that kind of has me worried a little bit there. If Robert Alford's going to be their number one corner, I know what that was like in Atlanta. It wasn't that great. So hopefully Malcolm Butler can stay healthy and be the Malcolm Butler we saw in New England. Wasn't really the same in Tennessee, but I think if anything, their Achilles here will be that secondary and the loss of Patrick Peterson. But I think their front seven is just as good as anybody else in this division. So I think that they should be just fine if their secondary can kind of at least play up to a serviceable level.
Sure. I mean, you got J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones getting after the quarterback, so just gotta hang with the wide receivers for hopefully 1 to 2 seconds tops.
Yep, and in this division, again, it's good. The margin of error in this division is very slim with all four of these teams being solid. So let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams. Miklos here, and obviously their biggest move this offseason was the quarterback swap, the big trade with the Detroit Lions, and the Rams are, they won't have a first-round pick until you and I are probably about 50 years old. But for their sake, I hope that they can at least get a Super Bowl out of it. They trade away Jared Goff and first-round pick, and they get Matt Stafford from Detroit. Do you think Matt Stafford over Jared Goff is going to be the piece and the difference that's going to put this team over the top and back into a Super Bowl contending team?
Well, I mean, the Rams certainly hope so. They're very much in win now mode. And I like the moves that they made on their offense. I do think Matt Stafford is an upgrade. He's got a huge arm, which Jared Goff really didn't have the strongest arm, at least not what he was known for. They bring in Deshaun Jackson as well. That was another nice addition in the offseason to just take the top off the defenses. But I think the biggest thing that kind of makes me a little bit less hopeful for the Rams offense was Cam Akers going down with that torn Achilles. I mean, if he was healthy, then this Rams offense would have been bona fide scary, especially the way Akers was playing at the end of last season, given a solid running game, and then Matt Stafford finally has all this talent around him. It would have been really exciting to see. So we're going to have to see how they pivot in the running back game with the loss of Cam Akers, but definitely very excited for Matt Stafford and the rest of this offense.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Darrell Henderson can carry that load there, because it doesn't really seem like they have another guy that's established to go behind him. So we'll have to see if these couple of guys numbered at 2 and 3 there with Xavier Jones and Raymond Callis and even Jake Funk are going to be guys that can kind of step up and take that number 2 role. But yeah, Cam Akers going down, I think, is a big loss for this team after what he, like you mentioned, what he did last year. Do you think that this offense with Sean McVay is tailor-made for Matt Stafford's air it out game that we saw in Glimpse in Detroit, but he just never had the elite talent around him or an elite play caller like Sean McVay to be able to go do that other than having a Calvin Johnson or Kenny Golladay at times?
Sure. I mean, I think if Sean McVay is the coach that we all think he is, and the few glimpses that he's shown, he will make an offense that will be incredible for Matt Stafford. And I think that's one of the things I'm actually really excited to see with the Rams, is to see how Sean McVay changes their offense and how they move the ball and throw the ball with a guy with the arm talent of Matt Stafford under center.
Yep, so they moved on from Jared Goff. They got to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. We'll see if they can get back there and get over the hump with Matt Stafford. As far as their defense goes, Miklos, obviously we know what Aaron Donald is, probably the best inside tackle in the game, and kind of change the defensive tackle position and what people are looking for. Just what do you think of this Rams defense? You obviously have some super all-pro pieces on it like Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in the secondary, but do you think that this group in general is going to be able to hold up against some really good offenses in this division?
So they have a lot of nice pieces. Even the addition of Ashawn Robinson that they brought in from Detroit, I think he's going to be great complement with Aaron Donald. And I mean, Leonard Floyd last year kind of found a renaissance, moving on from the Bears, coming to the Rams. Really, really impressed and had his best year as a pro. I'm really concerned about the losses that they had in the secondary, though. Losing John Johnson III, I mean, he was an unbelievably, I think, very underrated free safety for them back there. And then they also lose Troy Hill, another one of their starting corners. And then even Samson Ebukam, one of their linebackers. I feel like those three losses might be bigger than people think. I mean, it doesn't look like, looking at the roster here that they have on Our Lads, that they really have some top-tier talent replacing them. They still have Jalen Ramsey there, and Aaron Donald is, as we mentioned. Leonard Floyd has been how he is, but it's going to be interesting to see how this defense performs, and they might have some rocky games to start off the season.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the addition of Raheem Morris coming over as the new defensive coordinator for this team. Obviously, he's spent the last 10 or so years in Atlanta and was the defensive coordinator for Dan Quinn before taking over as interim head coach at the end of last season. And I really like the energy that Raheem Morris brings. I think he's a very solid players coach, but we'll have to see if the X's and O's are going to be enough because obviously we know Sean McVay is not a defensive guy. So really Raheem Morris is running this defense and Sean McVay kind of holds the offense. So we'll see what kind of scheme Raheem Morris has for some of these guys. I kind of saw a few of those mic'd up clips where he's going up to every guy in the defense. So it's good to see that he's trying to, be that positive influence on all the guys on that defense, and kind of, the Rams are more of a younger, upbeat team. So we'll have to see if the addition of Raheem Morris is going to pay off for them or not. The one thing I want to mention about this team is ever since losing Greg Zuerlein, they've had a revolving door at kicker, and they bring in Matt Gay, who, formerly with Tampa, and he's bounced around a little bit there. Do you think that, this team has kind of lost what they didn't know what they lost in Greg the Leg for all those years, that he was one of, if not the best kicker in the NFL, now that they really don't have a guy like that to be able to build them out with longer field goals?
Yeah, I think because Hecker has been so unbelievable and just entertaining to watch as a punter, it's kind of hidden that. But that's one of the things that nobody in the NFL ever wants to talk about is the kicking game and special teams. Generally, you just don't want to notice it, it seems, in the NFL. And if it's good, then, sure, you have a kicker who makes a really nice long kick every week. But it's crazy how little people care or pay attention to these things when it can be so crucial. I mean, you miss a field goal here, an extra point there, and it can cost you games. I mean, ask the Chargers. That is the history of their franchise.
Josh Lambo.
Yeah. So I do think if they can't get some stability as a kicker, especially considering how competitive this division is going to be, it could come back and seriously bite them in important games.
Yeah, we'll see if Matt Gay can put them over the top, but definitely Greg Zuerlein is a loss that they've yet to recover from, but we'll have to see if they can kind of pick up the slack there. So we'll move on to I got the LA Chargers open up for some reason here. We're not in the AFC West yet. In the second segment, we'll get to that. So we got the San Francisco 49ers, and as we mentioned earlier, this team went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, and then just were completely decimated. Like you mentioned, the Broncos and the 49ers probably had the most injuries in the league last year, both playing in the West divisions here. So what are we thinking from the 49ers? Obviously, Kyle Shanahan is back as the head coach, and what John Lynch's vision has been as the general manager. They trade up in the draft about 3 weeks before the draft to go up and get the third overall pick, and they eventually go and get Trey Lance, the quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo's still on this roster. There's rumors that the Colts might be interested in him with the Carson Wentz going down. If Jimmy G or Trey Lance are starting, do you think that really is going to affect this team either way, or do you see this team coming back with being completely healthy on the defense for the most part, and with that Kyle Shanahan-led offense?
So first of all, the 49ers, if everyone comes back healthy and returns even like 80% to form, especially the guys on defense, they're going to have one hell of a turnaround compared to the 6-10 season that they had last season. It's going to be very exciting this year. As for the big deal with the quarterbacks, I mean, both have their pros and cons. Jimmy G has got his injury history recently, and when he's been good, he's been really good. But I mean, there has been some questions about him as well. And Kyle Shanahan has mentioned or hinted at that Jimmy G is not the guy that can best run his system. And then they get Trey Lance, and Trey Lance, I mean, worlds of athleticism and arm talent, but I mean, he's only had, I think it was like 380 pass attempts that he had at the college level, which is crazy low. So he comes in extremely raw into one of the hardest positions in pro sports, period, to master. And I know Kyle Shanahan has been a wizard as a coach, but it'll be very interesting to see what the learning curve is if Trey Lance ends up being the guy in this offense.
Yeah, he missed the whole year last year not playing due to the pandemic and his team not playing within that conference. So the other interesting thing about this team is the wide receivers and the skill position players. I mean, we all know what George Kittle is. He's an all-pro tight end, one of the best in the league. But you look at the rest of their skill position players. I mean, they bring in a rookie, Trey Sermon from Ohio State. He's a third-round pick behind Raheem Mostert. And then at wide receiver, they've got Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Mohamed Sanu, who after Atlanta has kind of bounced around a little bit here. Do you think that this team, and they've made some additions on the offensive line, they bring in Alex Mack from Atlanta as well, the longtime center, and he knows what Kyle Shanahan asks for from a guy under center, obviously. So what do you think about these wide receivers? Do you think that they're going to be able to kind of hold up here and carry the load for what Kyle Shanahan wants in his offense?
So, I mean, Brandon Ayuk was really good in his rookie year, and Deebo Samuel, when he's been healthy, has been a beast out there. I think the real question, and I think the thing that will really separate the 49ers if it comes through, is Jalen Hurd. I mean, the third-round pick out of Baylor, he's been hampered by injuries his first couple of years in the league, but he is a physical presence and extremely talented, and if he can stay healthy and play to his potential on the field, then we could have a scary group of receivers here in San Francisco. I mean, Mohamed Sanu he's a pro's pro, but he's not exactly someone that teams are going to worry about and have their defense changed about. So I think really the top two guys definitely very talented, especially after the catch with the ball in their hands. But if Jalen Hurd can really develop and have a showing out this year, then it's going to be really exciting in San Francisco.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Mohamed Sanu, he played well in Kyle Shanahan's system in Atlanta as well, so he probably knows what kind of role that he's being expected of, to just kind of catch the ball and, on those short slant routes and not really do a whole lot on the outside. But I'm looking at their depth chart right now, and I had to shake my head. I couldn't believe when I saw this. I didn't even know this guy was still in the league. Kevin White, the former first-round bust wide receiver of the Chicago Bears, is on this roster. He's listed as a fifth wide receiver at this point. I can't believe this guy's still in the league.
Yeah, he's hanging around, man. He's hanging around. He's bouncing around. I mean, teams with the athleticism that he has, if I was a coach who was as good as Kyle Shanahan is, I would think that he's someone that I could fix and turn into a good player. And I mean, low risk, high reward, right? If he turns out, you got a beast of a wide receiver. If he doesn't, whatever. I mean, it's not like they are paying him a lot of money. I'm sure his contract is nothing to be worried about, and they can just cut him if they don't need him.
Yeah, every Bears fan right now is cringing, including your fiance. Shout outs to her for the Kevin White and that first round bust. But with that said, obviously, the defense, Miklos, this team is loaded with all-pro type players. You have Eric Armstead. You have Nick Bosa, Javon Kinlaw, they drafted last year, which we couldn't believe that they basically stole in the draft because they had traded away DeForest Buckner because he wanted that big contract. So they essentially replaced DeForest Buckner with Javon Kinlaw, and to me, that's a heck of a replacement. Both those are really good players. And then Fred Warner, what he does as a middle linebacker is unbelievable. And just Jimmy Ward as a free safety. They bring in Jason Verrett, who obviously isn't the same player that he once was, but still a very serviceable cornerback that is a longtime Los Angeles Chargers. So for me, I look at this San Francisco defense, and I think they're definitely going to give a lot of these top end offenses in this division some trouble here, because they've got playmakers all over this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and they still have D Ford as well
Mm-hmm.
on the defensive line there. And really, the biggest question for the 49ers defense is, can they stay healthy? That's what killed them last year.
Yep.
If they can keep this unit healthy for the majority of the season, we saw what happened last time this unit was healthy. I mean, obviously with a couple of changes here and there of different players, but they went to a Super Bowl. Their defense was dominant across the board. So if, especially Nick Bosa coming back healthy off that ACL, if he returns to form, which is more and more common these days with improved procedures for these guys whenever they have that injury, then it's going to be a scary defense again for these teams in the NFC West. And I really think the defense's health is what's going to make or break how well the 49ers do this season.
Absolutely. I think if this team stays healthy, they could have a 12 to 13 win season easily, with the amount of talent that they have on both sides of the ball. But especially this front is scary good, and they've got some very good young players on this defense, and exciting to see where they can go from here. And they bring in the longtime kicker Robbie Gould, coming over, the longtime kicker from the Chicago Bears. I believe he spent most of his career. So Robbie Gould's over there in San Francisco, and we'll have to see if he can be the Robbie Gould of maybe 15 years ago. We'll have to see if he can continue that. But yeah, Kyle Shanahan's led offense. We'll see what they can do in the NFC West. Lastly, the Seattle Seahawks, and this team is interesting. Obviously, they won the division last year, Miklos. What are we thinking from the Seattle Seahawks? Russell Wilson is back even after some trade rumors had been swirling this offseason about him being unhappy with the organization. For their sake, they better hope that he starts, because I don't think they want Geno Smith being their starting quarterback. So what are we thinking from the Pete Carroll Seattle Seahawks team this year?
Yeah, so the just looking at their offense, I think the most important thing that they did was invest a bit in the O-line. They brought in Gabe Jackson for the Raiders, who, if we didn't have such good guard play from our backups whenever he went down injured last year, I would have been more upset about losing him, because he's been a terrific offensive lineman since we drafted him. They brought in Brandon Shell last year, who played terrific for them, and that was one of the biggest things that Russell Wilson was upset about, is the amount of times that he's been hit and the amount of times he's been sacked, given that he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. And so I think investing in the O-line was the most important thing. And as for their skills positions, nothing's changed, and that's okay. They have arguably the most dominant duo at wide receiver in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who are just phenomenal. And then they bring back Chris Carson, and Rashad Penny's coming back healthy. So this offense looks ready to roll again. And if the O-line can be better than last year, then I don't see why they can't produce how they did last year. But the biggest thing, of course, is that they don't have the second half of the regular season like they did last year, where Russell Wilson went from MVP candidate to having like 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions over the last 6 games or so, I think it was, which, you can't have that if you want to be winning Super Bowls. But as with the 49ers, who we just mentioned, the biggest question mark is going to be their defense. They had some changes. They let Jaron Reed go, which I think was pretty surprising. The longtime D tackle that was extremely good for them, who they let just walk. And then they lost the Griffin brothers in Shaquem and Shaquille. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense turns out this year. Jamal Adams finally has a full offseason with them. They bring in Akila Witherspoon over from the San Francisco 49ers to replace Griffin. And yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, this defense for me is really going to be what makes or breaks this team from repeating, as NFC West champions. I mean, unlike the San Francisco 49ers, who I think have the talent, I just need to see this defense put it together first before I can, make them my favorite in this division, because there's just too many question marks for me on this defense. Obviously, taking nothing away from Bobby Wagner, I think he's one of, if not the best middle linebacker in all of football. But other than that, I mean, they've got a lot of question marks, a lot of new guys coming over. They got a huge turnover on the defense, like you mentioned. Losing the Griffin brothers, I think, is going to be big for them, and seeing how they can replace those guys. So Ken Norton Jr.'s got a tough job on his hands with that defense, and that the offense and Russell Wilson's going to have to carry the load again, which we've seen Russell Wilson be able to carry a team on his back before. So we'll have to see if he can do it again. But it looks like they tried to address the offensive line issue with bringing in a couple of guys, like you mentioned, Gabe Jackson and Brandon Shell as well. So, I mean, and the big trade for Dwayne Brown a few years ago from the Houston Texans, where they gave up a first-round pick to go and get him at left tackle. So I think that as long as the offense can still put up 30-ish points a game, which is highly possible with Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, it doesn't matter to me if their defense, gives up a few points here and there, because I think they have the offense to be able to make up for that. The only thing is that, like we keep mentioning, this division's very tough, 1-4. There's not much margin of error. Maybe if the Seahawks were in a division that maybe had a couple of weaker teams in it, you'd kind of think of them at a little bit higher. But to me, I'm just kind of not sold on the Seahawks altogether. But if they do go far, it's going to be the play of Russell Wilson in that offense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then they've got a new place kicker, or they've got Jason Myers as their kicker, who I believe they had last year that they had gotten from the Jets. So, Tyler Lockett returning punts and kicks. Miklos, do you like that one of your top receivers is doing that, or would you kind of keep him off of that to save the risk of injury and having one of your fourth or fifth guys, or signing just a specialist to kind of do that instead of having one of your top guys do it, like we saw with Antonio Brown as well with the Steelers?
Yeah, well, I know he's slotted in there right now, but I do think, and they kind of did it last season, where in more important situations he would go back there and return, because obviously he's unbelievably talented at it. But I do think they're trying really hard to work him away from that, so that it's less hits on him, it's less stress. And I mean, special teams is probably the most dangerous part of the game of football, where bodies are flying everywhere. It's not always coming from the directions that you expect whenever you're playing on offense or defense. So definitely, especially considering how valuable he is to the offense, you want to get a guy out of there if you can. But he is also incredibly talented as a returner. So you might see him mixed in there throughout the season in situations.
Okay, so we'll have to monitor that. So let's look at, before we wrap up for the AFC or the NFC West here, Miklos, the betting odds have the Rams and the 49ers both tied at plus 190, and then the Seahawks at plus 275, and the Cardinals all the way down in plus 582. So with that said, is there a team that you would want to bet on here? For the Cardinals would obviously be the team to bet on, obviously, because they're so far down the list here as a good squad. But who are you taking for the NFC West this year?
For winning, it's very tough. But if they're healthy, I think the 49ers are taking it this year. Just based on how talented that defense is and how solid the offense is, especially with Kyle Shanahan. I think he can, if it comes down to being Trey Lance, he can figure out a system to baby him into the NFL and let him do what he does best, and kind of cover up his deficiencies. And when you got a defense like that behind him, I mean, you can be okay with a couple of 3-and-outs here and there, because you're going to be getting the ball back real fast. So they're the team I'm the most confident in. I know the Rams are a favorite because they brought in Stafford, but really skeptical of the Rams defense and the turnover there, and especially with the loss of Cam Akers. I just think they're going to have a really hard time approving, all of these stars that they have to prove that they're the team to beat.
You bring up a lot of good points, but I'm picking the Rams for that sake, because they better be good, because they have no future first-round picks for a while. So they bring in Matt Stafford. They make the trade for Jalen Ramsey a couple years ago. They have Aaron Donald. They lose Cam Akers, which is a big loss. But for me, I think if Sean McVay and this team wants to stay together, they're going to have a good season. And to me, the Seahawks are the team that has the most question marks right now. As much as we love the Cardinals, I just don't know if they're at that level yet because of how good some of these teams are. Both these teams have been to the Super Bowl in the last 3 years, and the Rams and the 49ers. So for me, I'm going to go with the Rams. But again, like you mentioned, there's a lot of question marks on the defense as well. But I think that they need to get there with what they've given up as far as draft capital. So I believe in what Matt Stafford can do. We saw what he can do in Detroit, and now that he's on actually a team and a system that can really elevate him to that next level and kind of showcase the talent that he has. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with the Rams, and if that trade for Jared Goff was really that much worth it for them to be able to give up a first round pick and to give away Jared Goff like that. So for me, I'm taking the Rams because I think that they need to, and you're taking the San Francisco 49ers, which both of them were leading the way in the betting odds at plus 190. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a commercial break on today's show. We're going to come back, and I know Miklos is fired up to talk about the AFC West, as you can see by his sweater there with his Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders. So stay right here. Be right back on Straight to the Extra Point in our 2021 NFL season previews right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Experience a new way to play daily fantasy sports and esports on Thrive Fantasy. Thrive's game concept revolves around player props, which are simple over-unders on player stats. There are contests for traditional sports including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and cricket, as well as esports titles including CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, and more coming soon. Here's how to play. Choose your lineup of over-unders for top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Each prop has a fantasy point total based on how likely it is to hit. The more points a selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points and win a share of the prize pool. Thrive is awarded over $2 million in cash, so come and prop up today.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to segment 2 of our Straight to the Extra Point West Division preview show right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. And guys, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, smashing that like button, and hitting that bell icon for all updates and videos that are posted on our YouTube channel. And give us some love if you're enjoying the video versions of the podcast. So with that said, Miklos, let's jump right into part 2 today, and I know you're excited to talk about the AFC West division. And for you viewers out there, let's quickly do some little bit of background info. With the past winners of this division, unlike the NFC West, their brethrens over there has not been a lot of parity within this division in the last 10 years. It's been dominated by two teams, starting in 2010 with the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the Broncos won 5 years in a row from 2011 to 2015, including a few Super Bowl appearances there with Peyton Manning at the helm. And then the last 5 seasons, it has been dominated by the Andy Reid-led Kansas City Chiefs, from Alex Smith to now Patrick Mahomes. So Miklos, as a person who has had to feel the wrath of both of those teams running over the division the last decade or so, just what are your thoughts on what has happened here?
Yeah, they've really run roughshod over the AFC West, and I mean, unlike the NFC West, this division has not been very competitive, with usually one or two, as usually the Chiefs or Broncos over the last decade, premier teams, and then the other two, my Raiders and the Chargers, lulling in the basement, doing a whole lot of nothing. So that has been really tough to follow, but we'll always hopeful for the next year, and we'll see what this season brings.
And it's crazy because the Chargers, we always know the Chargers have a great roster on paper for the most part, and they just never put it together on the field. And the Raiders there for a few years, when Derek Carr first came in as a rookie, kind of took the league by storm, and I was shocked that team did not end up at least winning one division title for a couple of those years there before the kind of Gruden era took over there.
Yeah, I mean, we had 1-12-4 season in there. I think it was Jack Del Rio's second year with Derek Carr. And then we kind of just fell apart real hard there. And then now we have John Gruden coming in and still sputtering away, but I think on the uptrend.
Hopefully. So last year's standings there, obviously the Chiefs going 14-2, making it to the Super Bowl, almost repeated as Super Bowl champions. If Patrick Mahomes wasn't running around for 400 yards all around the field because of the Tampa Bay defense, and revamping that offensive line was a big emphasis for them going into this year. But the Raiders finished second last year at 8-8, the Chargers at 7-9, and the Broncos at 5-11. So obviously the Chiefs have been running roughshod over the last 5 years, and they showed it again last year.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely a combination of things that this the standings don't show. One, how decimated the Broncos were. If people can remember way back when to last year's season preview, I was so excited about what the Broncos were going to bring to the table last year, and then they basically lost their entire roster to combination of injuries and what have you. And then the Raiders finishing 8-8, which is so depressing because they kicked off the season so unbelievably well, especially considering how hard of a schedule they had to kick the season off in, playing the Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans, and playing against New England, and all. They had all of these tough games to kick the season off, including Tom Brady as well in Tampa Bay, and they actually came out of that better than they did in the back half, which I thought would have been a lot easier for them. And then the Chargers, very impressive with Justin Herbert, but they continue to be the Chargers, and they had a record, I think it was 3 or 4 games last year that they lost when they were leading by more than 10 points at halftime, which is just such a Chargers stat. And then, of course, the Chiefs. I mean, as you mentioned, Patrick Mahomes running for his life in the Super Bowl, and they needed to revamp the O-line, which is exactly what they did in the offseason, which pisses me off to no end.
The Raiders went 6-2 on the road last year and 2-6 at home. Do you think that had something to do with no fans being at Allegiant Stadium for their opening in Vegas?
I definitely think it was weird last year and definitely hurt some teams, perhaps the Raiders as well, to not have their fans there, especially the Raiders fans, the extremely faithful and travel well. It was killing all of us not to have fans in the stadium, and I'm so excited for the first home game this year when Allegiant Stadium can get up and rockin' with the Raiders faithful.
A proper opening of a stadium there in Vegas. It's going to be crazy. So let's start off here with the Denver Broncos, and like we keep mentioning, one of the most decimated rosters in all of football last year. Vic Fangio back as head coach, Pat Shurmur as offensive coordinator. What are we looking at from the Denver Broncos? Obviously, they got a very young offense that looks very exciting, but I think where this team is going to go is going to depend on if Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater can carry them with carry the load. With obviously you have some good quarterbacks in this division, so, and some up and coming quarterbacks as well. So what are we thinking from the offense of the Denver Broncos and Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater under center?
Yeah, the 3 factors that are going to matter the most for the Broncos is, number one, most importantly, far and away, is who the quarterback is going to be and how they play. Drew Lock, I know he was extremely frustrating to watch last year, but I'm cutting him a little bit of a break considering who he was playing with and the struggles of the entire team overall. That being said, he did make so many head-scratching plays and just horrible plays as well that he absolutely cannot do if he wants to be successful in this league. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater, who we know what he's capable of, and incredible that he's come back from the injury that he came back from. But he isn't exactly the most flashy quarterback in Carolina. He just kind of, managed the game, which is not a bad thing. That can be just what the Broncos need to continue winning with the strong running game they have. Number 2, the biggest thing for KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy to stop dropping the football. Both young wide receivers last year, I think, led the league in that category of dropped footballs, and they're both so unbelievably talented. If they just catch the ball, that will mean worlds of difference for this offense. And then the final thing is if the defense can stay healthy. So much talent on the defense. Von Miller coming back, Bradley Chubb coming off a great season. They bring in Patrick Surtain in the draft. They retain Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons, their 2 stud safeties. If these guys can stay healthy and the offense can figure it out, it'll be a good year for Denver.
I'm looking, if we go back to the offense real quick, Cortland Sutton obviously had the season ending injury last year, and that really hurt the Denver Broncos and their receiver depth. So I'm with you. I think Hamler and Judy can take that next step, and having Sutton back will be big for them. Kendall Hinton still on the roster if they need another wide receiver to play quarterback, which that whole situation was a mess in itself where they needed to have a wide receiver play quarterback last year with their whole quarterback room going down in COVID protocol. So I'm interested to see. I think Drew Lock, I think them not drafting a quarterback this year showed that they still believe in Drew Lock, at least for one more year. They're going to give him one more chance here as a second-round pick in 2019, that he can still be the guy, and he's got some competition now with Teddy Bridgewater and kind of a veteran guy to kind of, lean on a little bit there. Teddy's going to be a good team player, as he always has been throughout his career, no matter where he's been. So I think Drew Lock, we're going to see if he can rise to the occasion here with the Denver Broncos, and with a serviceable offense now back. You have Noah Fant, obviously a very talented first-round tight end that they took a few years ago as well. So I think the offense has the capability to do it. Their O-line, to me, is a little bit suspect, but what Denver Broncos offense hasn't had a suspect offensive line, even when Peyton Manning was playing. So I think that, again, wherever this team goes, it's going to be Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater carrying them to that. Is like you mentioned, they've got playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, and the Broncos are always going to have a good defense. That's just who they are, no matter who their coach is and their system. They always lean on their defense and can go as far as their offense is going to take them. So I think that they can lean on the defense to a certain extent, but this offense really has to prove and show that potential that we kind of gave them a pass for last year with the amount of injuries that they had and just kind of the bad luck with that. So I think this year, with that extra year of experience and these young guys, they need to take that next step this year in order for us to really think of the Broncos as a contender here in the AFC West.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, they have the question mark at the worst possible spot. You never want a quarterback question mark out there. But with Melvin Gordon, and then they drafted Javonte Williams, the very talented running back out of North Carolina, at least they'll have a strong running game to help them out. But they're definitely only going to go as far as their quarterback takes them.
Yeah, and you can bet on the Denver Broncos taking a defensive player in the first round like they did this year with Patrick Surtain, which I think was an excellent pick. So we'll have to see if he can pay dividends to that secondary right away. So let's move on from the Denver Broncos here, Miklos, and we're going to go to the Super Bowl, I guess almost back-to-back Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. We expect them to be contenders once again, not just for this division, but for the entire AFC, and to try to get back to the Super Bowl for a third time representing the AFC. Really, there's not much to talk about with this team as far as, what holes they might have. Obviously, the only thing is that they had to revamp their offensive line, which was really the only big hole that this team had, as, like we mentioned, just duress that Patrick Mahomes was under in the Super Bowl by that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And they go out and they make that trade for Orlando Brown from Baltimore, which you were so skeptical about as far as why Baltimore would do that and not ask for more when you're trading a starting left tackle, a young left tackle star in this league, to already the most feared team in the league without getting a lot more. So do you think that the Chiefs did enough with this revamped offensive line to be able to keep Patrick Mahomes from running for his life?
Unfortunately, I absolutely think they did. I mean, first they signed Joe Thuney to a massive contract at a free agency, which was honestly an amazing signing for them. He's been so good for the Patriots since they drafted him. Then the Orlando Brown trade, which, as you mentioned, just unbelievable that the Broncos or the Baltimore Ravens traded him for what they did to a Super Bowl contender in the same conference, which is just ridiculous. They bring in Mike Remmers as well. And let's not forget, we have Dr. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif coming back to compete at that guard spot. I mean, they missed him last year as well. So they definitely have the O-line revamped. And as for the rest of the roster, they basically returned everyone, which, I mean, we'll get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers returning their whole roster too. But the only changes that the Chiefs made were desperately needed, and they made the right ones. The biggest challenge they have now is to avoid the Super Bowl hangover. I was talking to you in the pre-show. So since 1993, there has only been one team that has returned to the Super Bowl after losing the previous year, and that team was quarterbacked by Tom Brady. And we know that anything that Tom Brady does is, you can't compare it to anything else. So it is history more than anything else that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to compete against, especially recently. It is so hard to win in the NFL, and I know they have all the talent in the world, and Patrick Mahomes is ridiculous. But the NFL is still the NFL. The playoffs are still one win and one loss, and you're done. So, I mean, all they need is one bad game, and that could be it for them. And they don't make it back to the Super Bowl. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for them.
And to me, I think the balance of power has shifted from the NFC to the AFC as far as the amount of top-end teams. We talked about how many great young quarterbacks are here in the AFC and how those teams have kind of developed over the last couple of years here as the NFC kind of dominated for the most part. There were a few good teams, obviously, over the years in the AFC, but for the most part, the NFC, I think, was the more superior conference from top to bottom, and I think now the AFC is that. So I think the Chiefs kind of have to stay on their toes because there are 4 or 5 teams chomping at the bit to kind of take this team down, and when you're the one being hunted like the Chiefs have been the last couple of years and the team that everybody wants to beat to showcase that they can play up to that benchmark of you, then I think that the Chiefs are really, they have to keep improving every year and not being complacent. But I think Eric Bieniemy coming back as the offensive coordinator, I think is going to be huge for this team as well. We obviously saw he had a ton of interest as a head coach and during the head coaching carousel and last offseason, and he decided to stay with Andy Reid and call plays for him. So I think that's going to be huge, the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs have Eric Bieniemy back and he didn't go take a head coaching job somewhere else. It speaks dividends to what he believes in with what this team can possibly do.
Yeah, and I think it's the first time in a decade I saw that Andy Reid is returning the same coordinators in back-to-back seasons, which is incredible. And obviously super important to have continuity in the NFL, as we saw last year with all the injuries that teams were having. So that is going to be another huge positive for them, unfortunately, for the rest of the AFC West and for my Raiders. But yeah, we will see what the season brings.
We always wonder about the Chiefs' defense, though, Miklos, and at times they've proved us wrong and they've stepped it up big time. Obviously, we know what Frank Clark can do. And since he's come over from Seattle, and obviously Chris Jones being the former Super Bowl MVP that he was, and kind of Steve Spagnuolo being able to hold this defense together. We know what the offense has been and all the money that they put on that side of the ball, but do you think that the defense has showed enough here and they've made enough strides with it to be able to kind of hang here, and Tyrann Mathieu was a big addition to that as well last year?
Yeah, I have slighted them before as they have had off games, but they overall have been an unbelievably solid unit. They add Jarran Reed, who we just mentioned, left Seattle in free agency, which was very surprising, just to solidify that D-line even more. I mean, sure, they may not have anyone who's like crazy other than maybe Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu. Even Frank Clark has, when he's having his really good games, who jump out as absolutely dominant. But as a unit overall, they have been incredible and have got the job done. I mean, when you got Patrick Mahomes out there slinging the rock for your offense, it's easy to play defense.
Yeah, and I'm waiting to see which skill position player gets casted off by another team that the Chiefs kind of pick up as a former guy that was a Pro Bowl type player like a Sammy Watkins or a Le'Veon Bell that they kind of just picked up as an extra guy and just kind of hung around there with injuries. Obviously, they're with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, what he showed last year is going to be big for them as well. Darrell Williams as their backup running back, and they pick up Jerick McKinnon from San Francisco, who we've seen over his career can be a very useful catching back out of the backfield and a versatile guy when he can stay healthy. So I don't think they've missed a beat here, and I'm interested to see what kind of guys they pick up from other teams during the season.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the benefit of being unbelievably good and the modern era of sports where guys have way more freedom to move around to teams, especially in free agency now, and guys want to go where they can win. So who wouldn't want to go play with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs right now?
Yep, those discounts to play for winning teams. So let's move on here to the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll finish off with the Raiders, Miklos. Save the best for last for you. So we'll go to the Chargers here, and obviously they have a brand new head coach as well with Brandon Staley. They've got Joe Lombardi as their offensive coordinator. We saw what Justin Herbert did last year as a rookie. He was unbelievable, had one of the best rookie years we've seen from a quarterback. And again, this Chargers team always looks good on paper. We know what kind of talent they have, but it's this mindset that they always cannot get over the hump. They can't finish out games, and they just continue to, I guess you could say, just underachieve with the rosters that they have had over the years. And now with another new regime, they're going to have to prove themselves here. We know they've got high-level talent on both sides of the ball, but for the Chargers, it's putting that whole thing together as a whole unit and continuing it for 4 quarters is going to be their biggest challenge.
Absolutely. I think they, on paper, are the most exciting team from last year coming in the AFC West. I mean, especially with the season we saw out of Justin Herbert. On the offense, they returned basically everybody, and they added Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater to the offensive line to protect their valuable asset in Justin Herbert, who you mentioned set every rookie record for a quarterback. They still have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen out there. They add Jared Cook to bring a nice goal line threat in as a tight end. Overall, the offense looks very exciting. It's just a matter of consistency. And then on the defense, yes, they lost Melvin Ingram, but they have Derwin James coming back, and they are praying to all of the gods that he can stay healthy because he is phenomenal whenever he is on the field. They also add Asante Samuel in the draft to make up for Casey Hayward departing. And again, as you mentioned, the only thing standing between the Chargers and being great and contending even with the Chiefs for the AFC West crown is the fact that they're the Chargers. If this roster was on any other franchise, I would be talking about how unbelievable they were, but they are on the most cursed franchise in the NFL. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had 2 or 3 games where they lost because their kicker slipped and kicked it into a defensive lineman who returned it for a touchdown to cost them the game or something stupid like that. So that's really the only thing holding the Chargers back at this point.
Do you think it makes a difference for them with the amount of moves that the Rams have made and going out to get Matt Stafford, who they share a stadium with now in Los Angeles? Do you think that makes a difference for them being able to, now that they have to share a stadium with another team and kind of there's not direct competition between the two because they're not in the same conference, but just for the fact that they share a building, we see with the Giants and the Jets how important that is. Do you think that that's going to play a role into them this year, just seeing the Rams kind of make that move for Stafford and trying to take that Super Bowl step there?
Well, speaking as a fan of a team that did go to LA and then left, LA fans are fickle. They like you if you're winning, and they're not going to show up if you're not. So I do think the Rams are going to be very exciting to watch this year, as you mentioned with Stafford. And if they're winning a lot of games, that's going to be good. And same with the Chargers. I think both teams being good and having a lot of exciting talent there is going to be good for both of them because it's going to be double the draw for fans to come to the stadium and come out and support them.
Do you think Austin Eckler, hopefully being able to play a whole season, will kind of be the heartbeat of this team and the guy that Justin Herbert can rely on to catch the ball and to run as well, kind of be that all-purpose back that we know Eckler can be when he's healthy?
I think really the most important thing is if Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly can both step up and take a little bit of the load off Eckler so that he can stay healthy, because we know what Eckler is capable of. But if he has good complement in Jackson and Kelly, who can come in, take some reps, take some pounding, and help move the running game forward, then it's going to make Eckler that much more effective and dangerous.
They lost Hunter Henry, who left in free agency. They bring Jared Cook in, the former Raider, so they're bringing in a guy that they're familiar with, and obviously most notably was New Orleans last year. But they definitely got some new pieces there. But they bring back Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, so and they bring in Josh Palmer, the Canadian, through the draft from Tennessee. So do you think that their skill position players, as we wrap up here with the Chargers, do you think that if they can step it up, that this team has a chance in this division?
I really think offense is not going to be a problem for them. Justin Herbert has basically all the weapons that he had last year, with the exception of Jared Cook coming in for Hunter Henry. And with the upgrades to the O-line, I really think they're poised to have a great offensive year. It's just about if the bodies can stay healthy, the defense can perform, and the Chargers cannot be the Chargers.
Well said. So last but not least here, ladies and gentlemen, we left it for last for Miklos, the Las Vegas / Oakland Raiders. His team, the team that he obviously wants to talk about here. So I'm not going to take up much more of the time. Miklos, go ahead and take it away. What are you looking at from the Raiders this year after an 8-8 season, John Gruden back as head coach? What are we expecting from this team, and how are they going to compete in the AFC West?
The biggest thing for the Raiders overall is going to be growth. That's really what they need, both on offense and defense. I'll start with the offense. As I mentioned, Rodney Hudson hurts to the core that we lost him. I thought that was the one guy that we really couldn't part with. I know he cost a lot, but just the relationship that Derek Carr and Rodney had together, and how talented Rodney Hudson was, I think just made the O-line better across the board. The team is very high on Andre James, who we brought in as an undrafted rookie a couple years ago and has had time to be seasoned behind Rodney Hudson. So if he can step in and even if it's a minimal step back, that will still be good for the consistency that at least he's been there for the team. As for the rest of the O-line, I mentioned this countless times last year, how impressed I was with how the Raiders O-line played. They had second and third string guys. I don't think they had more than 1 or 2 games where they rolled out the same 5 guys at all 5 positions. We had Alex Leatherwood in the draft at right tackle, which a lot of people said was an off the board pick, but it's in line with how the Raiders have been drafting recently. I mean, he's from Alabama. Even if he was not the most talented, he's a blue chip captain from a blue chip program. And based on how the Raiders O-line has been playing last year, especially, I'm okay with him slotting in there. I think he's going to be really good with the rest of the squad. The real question is if Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs can step up. Both of them were hampered by injuries and also just underperformed based on where they were drafted and what was expected of them. And especially considering we let Nelson Aguilar, who dominated last year with the Raiders, walk and replaced him with John Brown and Willie Snead. I mean, we'll see what this wide receiver core can bring to the table. But Derek Carr is coming back after another monster year, and he's still got his favorite weapon in Darren Waller, who's been unbelievable. And then the running back room, I think, upgraded. I really was upset that we let Devontae Booker go because he was a great compliment to Josh Jacobs and had some really good games. But Kenyon Drake is undeniably a weapon and can be lined up all over the field. And so I'm really excited to see what he brings to the offense. On the defense, biggest upgrade, Trayvon Moehrig. We needed a free safety, a true bona fide free safety to go over the top of the defense and be that ball hawk back there. And then as for the rest of the defense, huge upgrade in Yannick Ngakoue coming in and Quentin Jefferson from the Bills, and even Solomon Thomas, if he can have a bit of a renaissance from his kind of disappointing production with the 49ers after being taken as a first round pick. Those are the major moves. Everywhere else, it's about growth. Max Crosby's got to continue doing what he's got to do. Cleveland Farrell, still underperforming based on where we drafted him, but he's been showing steady improvement every year and continues to grow. And if he starts adding more of a pass rush threat, especially with Yannick Ngakoue there, then that'll be a huge upgrade for the defense. Corey Littleton needs to grow and improve to be what he was for the Rams after a disappointing year last year when we brought him in as a huge free agent. And then on the defense, Trayvon Mullen has been incredible locking it down on the one side, but Damon Arnett was very high and low in his rookie year. And I know he was hampered by an injury, but he really needs to get back to more highs and less lows. And then I think Trayvon Moehrig is just going to make Jonathan Abram better because Abram's a weapon, and if he doesn't have to worry about covering, which he absolutely does not want to do if you've ever watched him play, then we can bring him down into the box and just be the baller that he is. And then as for the special teams, not much to say there. I mean, AJ Cole's been solid as a punter. They got a bit of a looking at the camp, they got a bit of a kicking competition going on for the place kicker, especially with Daniel Carlson being on the COVID list currently. But Carlson was really good last year, and then with Renfro, Ruggs, and Jalen Richard usually returning. They've been steady on returns, if not, exceptional. They're not costing us games. So overall, the rookies can make the growth and the young players can make the growth. We saw in our win against the Kansas City Chiefs what this team is capable of whenever they're firing on all cylinders. It's just a matter of doing it consistently and not fading down the stretch.
First thing, I guess we got spoiled with Shane Leckler and Seabass all those years being the punter and the kicker of that team. But what do you think about the depth, Miklos? Do you think that the depth is going to be able to hold up? Obviously, they've got some decent guys there, some guys that they drafted pretty high. Obviously, Tanner Muse was a guy who you were kind of iffy about it as far as a safety, but he looks like he's moved to linebacker at this point. So what do you think about if a couple of these guys go down on the defense, which they obviously have some all-pro talents there? Do you think that the depth of the Raiders defense is going to be able to hold up, which we saw it wasn't last year?
Yeah, I think on the defensive end, the depth is definitely a concern. they've solidified, I think, the D-line pretty well with quite a few guys there. So they have some more depth on D-line, but linebacker, the drop-off is pretty harsh with Tanner Muse, being talented. They drafted Divine Diablo, who was a safety in college as well, but slotted to be a linebacker here. Very little experience in the backups and linebackers. And then even in the secondary, I mean, I just mentioned the starters all have 1, 2, 3 years tops under their belt. It's good that they brought Carl Joseph back to add some depth, and they added Casey Hayward as well to bring some more veteran presence there. But yeah, the drop off from the starters is pretty drastic in terms of experience and, if not, also talent. So hopefully they can stay healthy, and we'll just have to see how these young players perform.
Do you believe in Gus Bradley being able to bring that unit together and kind of running that defense?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
We saw what Gus Bradley's done as a coordinator and what he hasn't done as a head coach. So as long as he's coordinator, we'll have to see if that's a better spot for him, as we see some guys are just better suited as coordinators and not head coaches. But lastly, with the Raiders, I mean, their offense, like you mentioned, they've gotten a lot of speed on this offense now. Obviously, Henry Ruggs is all-world speed. Smokey John Brown is a fast guy throughout his career in Baltimore and Buffalo, and they bring in Willie Snead is a good slot guy, kind of middle of the road kind of receiver, and then Kenyon Drake, I think, is a huge add from the Arizona Cardinals, like you mentioned. Just a very versatile back and a guy that can kind of take the load off of Josh Jacobs, because obviously the heartbeat of this offense is going to be through Josh Jacobs, whether they like it or not, and he's going to be the bell cow to carry much of the load. But in the passing game, I think Kenyon Drake's going to be able to relieve a lot of that from Josh Jacobs and like you mentioned, be able to keep him on the field and not be injured. So I think that these running backs in Jacobs and Kenyon Drake are going to play a huge part in this offense succeeding.
Yeah, absolutely. And as unfortunate it is, because as a defensive player, I love seeing good defense, but the offense is what's going to decide games for us this year. And really, the biggest question is, can the defense grow enough that they can come up with those 1 or 2 vital stops that will win us games? Because we know last year, I mean, we went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in 2 games, and they come up with 1 stop in that second game, and we would have swept the Chiefs in the division, as crazy as that sounds. And I mean, we went toe-to-toe with Drew Brees and the Saints in New Orleans and beat them as well. So we know what the offense is capable of. It's just a matter if the defense can give us those few vital stops to help us win games.
Yeah, and do you think that the run game is really going to decide it and open up for that passing game and that play action from Derek Carr to some of those very fast receivers out on the outside? Do you think that that's going to be what this offense is going to look like this year through Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, and open it up for Derek Carr, not making him throw 40 times a game?
Absolutely. I mean, the offense goes through Jacobs and that offensive line. The one thing that I've been really happy with the last couple of years is how well we've established the ground and pound run game when we've needed to, especially with Jacobs and just the monster O-lineman that we have over there. So if we can do that effectively, then we can just have our speedy wide receivers go over the top and hopefully win a lot of games.
And lastly here, before we wrap up the show today, the betting odds for the AFC West, as for some reason I have it as the NFC West here, but it is the AFC West, and it is the Chiefs obviously at minus 317, the Chargers at plus 550, the Broncos at plus 597, and the Raiders at plus 1,920. So, Miklos, what are we thinking, and who are you picking for the AFC West this year?
Despite the historical challenges of them going back to the Super Bowl, I do think the Chiefs are going to win this division again. They just returning so much talent and solidifying the offensive line. They're just world beaters right now. And well, it may be difficult to repeat because anything can happen in the playoffs when it comes to the course of a season and whether they'll top the division. I think it would be a shock if they didn't win the division again.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that the rest of these 3 teams play in a division with a team that looks like they're going to be having a dynasty here and for the last couple of years and for the foreseeable future with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and what that combo is able to accomplish. So you can't pick against the Chiefs right now. Until somebody knocks them off their throne in the AFC, let alone the AFC West, I think you have to continue to pick the Kansas City Chiefs, and they give us no reason to think otherwise. They improved in the big area that they needed to improve, which was the offensive line, and basically stole Orlando Brown from the Baltimore Ravens, which we can talk about all day long about that trade. But the Chiefs, it's hard to pick against them, and I don't think we're the only two people that are going to be picking the Chiefs again. I think it's pretty unanimous at this point. So the other three teams, they definitely got a lot of work to do, but they know what that benchmark is. That's the team they have to go through. If they can somehow beat the Chiefs in that division, like you mentioned, the Raiders went toe-to-toe with them last year. That's the team you have to try to beat. So if you're going to need to know it, you play them twice a year. You know what it takes to be the best team in the AFC, because they are currently, the benchmark at this point. So with that said, Miklos, any other final thoughts before we wrap up today?
Can't wait for the next preview.
Can't wait. So we both got the Chiefs winning the AFC West. He's got the Niners winning the NFC West, and I've got the LA Rams. So a little bit of a difference there in the NFC West, but the AFC West is kind of got to pick it up here. Broncos, Chargers, and the Raiders got some work to do. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Straight to the Extra Point right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, and delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of the show. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me right underneath there at Caputs13_AGM. As well, you can follow my co-host Miklos at Miklos_McMaster. And a big thank you to all of our great sponsors help put us on Support the Network, keeping this show on the air. Make sure you're checking them out and telling them the Armchair GM sent you. And finally, to you viewers out there and NFL junkies for tuning in and listening along for this episode. And please, if you're on the YouTube version and the video version, please hit that subscribe button. Give us some love, hit that bell icon, and subscribe and like us for all updates on new episodes that come to the network. And we're going to be having 3 more coming to the network with this podcast, and 3 more season previews to come next week. The week after that, we've got 3 more weeks worth of football talk and lots going into the NFL season. So really looking forward to the NFL season. And this has been the the Straight to the Extra Point and our West Division preview show right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. We'll see you guys next week. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.